Good afternoon. My name is Aisha Chugtai, and I'm the chair of the Budget Committee. I'm going to call back to order our adjourned committee meeting for Tuesday, December 10th. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify the presence of a quorum.
Councilmember Payne.
Present.
Wansley is absent. Rainville.
Present.
Vita.
Present.
Ellison is absent. Osman.
Present.
Cashman.
Present.
Jenkins is absent. Chavez.
Present.
Chowdhury.
Present.
Palmisano.
Present.
Vice Chair Koski.
Present.
Chair Chugtai.
Present.
There are 10 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Colleagues, we are going to continue working our way through the markup packet. This afternoon, we left off having with item amendment number 39, so we will begin with amendment number 40. So with that, amendment number 40 is the Small Business High Road Labor Standards Intervention Pilot Project item offered by Vice Chair Koski. Vice Chair Koski, will you please introduce and move approval of your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Minneapolis Small Business High Road Labor Standards Intervention Pilot Project is the pilot project I created and brought forward for the American Rescue Plan Act Phase 2 funding. The pilot project provided small businesses, especially BIPOC and immigrant-owned businesses, with much-needed support services, including education, one-on-one meetings with bookkeepers, access to HR software, and ongoing support to help them meet and exceed the city's labor standards. Year one of the pilot project was so successful in generating business and community interest and learning critical lessons about the nature of the problem and the best approaches to building solutions. It confirmed the city's Labor Standards Enforcement Division's assumptions that the source of the large number of labor standards violations in these communities was not purely willful, but just a lack of administrative capacity resulting from these business owners' systemic marginalization. Year two, we are aiming to build on our initial successes and implement changes informed by the first year. We're making the program more flexible with a greater emphasis on meeting our BIPOC businesses where they are within the community, with more coordination with bookkeeper support and working to reduce the lack of government coordination around small business support and labor standards compliance. The pilot project is a creative, innovative example of how we can support employers achieve compliance with labor standards and improve job quality for employees. Thank you.
Vice Chair Koski has moved approval of amendment number 40. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
That item has been properly moved and seconded. And before we begin with discussion, I will note that we've been joined in this meeting by Councilmember Wansley. Colleagues, are there any questions or discussion related to this item? I will first recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask Director Hansen to help explain what this decrease means to the BTAP program. This sounds like a valued pilot, and it has the support of civil rights, as I understand it.
Welcome back, Director Hansen. If you'll begin by introducing yourself.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Eric Hansen. I'm the CPED Director. So what this would do is reduce the about 300,000. We have about a budget for business technical assistance program about $350 a year. This would bring it down by 100,000. You know, based on our estimates, at about 100 to between 50 and 100 fewer businesses. The way the program works is that we use community-based organizations. They give services based on what the need is. So it's really hard to put like a specific dollar to how many businesses, because some businesses need a little bit of assistance, some need more, and that's about the estimate of the impact of this budget amendment.
So I'm sorry, how many businesses would
Between 50 and 100 wouldn't get free service.
Mm-hmm. So that is the trade-off here, colleagues, is helping businesses that are local job creators. I had to have a conversation with a group in the Uptown area where they shared where there were 28 shuttered businesses in their community in the Lindale area. I also want to point out that this is a perfect example of the concern I've been expressing earlier. This is a phase 2 of a pilot program, and we did not thoroughly plan for the potential of a whole program here. So that's why we're here now, needing to allocate more money to it. We tried something new without the forethought of how to support it if it goes well. The fact that phase 1 was successful and now we want phase 2 is a good problem to have. But it is a problem nonetheless. I would really encourage all authors of these pilot programs to better consider these kinds of needs from the future. I wish that would have been done here. I will support this. It is a need for with civil rights, and they certainly have demonstrated the capacity to use it. But I just need to point out that we shouldn't be doing these kinds of programs without any plan for how to fund them in the future, and we go and take away from other needs that have been working very successfully, like our BTAP program.
Thank you. Vice Chair Koski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Director, I just wanted to make sure to clarify, the BTAP program has currently $350,000 ongoing funding. In this new budget, we are adding another $300,000, so making that up to $650,000.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Chair Chugtai, Councilmember Koski, that's correct. That other amount is for Uptown-related business assistance. And so it's specified for that area. But the general BTAP funding for citywide application or organizations is about $350,000.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that. And I just also want to note that I have been preparing and planning for this program and the funding that we can get. And so this funding here is going to help us leverage other funding that is coming to this program through foundations and other sources. So we are not the only source of funding for this phase 2. And what I do hope is to be a future ongoing program, because sometimes it does take 1 or 2 phases in order for us to understand the impacts. And so want to make sure that I do that in a succinct way before we make it an ongoing program. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And then I will note that we have also been joined in this meeting by Council Members Jenkins and Ellison. And with that, I will, colleagues, we have the Small Business High Road Labor Standards Intervention Pilot Project Amendment offered by Vice Chair Koski before us. I will ask the clerk to call the roll on amendment number 40.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Walmsley. Aye. Rainville.
Aye.
Vita.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins is absent. Chavez.
No, Jenkins is present.
Sorry. Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chugtai.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That motion carries. Amendment number 41 has been revised, and it's just the proposal document that has been revised. So the motion document is the same as what's in your binders. Amendment number 41 is from Council Member Chowdhury and myself. I will recognize Council Member Chowdhury to please introduce and move approval of your amendment.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, colleagues. This is a proposal allocating $900,000 one-time funding to create a forgivable loan program supporting small and local businesses impacted by major construction on the public right-of-ways. I'm sure I'm not the only council member who has heard from small businesses in the city that have suffered the impacts of infrastructure improvements. This is all also in consideration of the historical context of the COVID-19 pandemic that has made the economics for local businesses tough as well. I've had several conversations with local businesses in my ward and throughout the city about the need for this. had a conversation with Director Hansen about creating a forgivable loan program, and he was kind enough to share with me that there is a vast historical knowledge of forgivable loan programs carried out during his time at the city. The program would target businesses along a few corridors: Lowry Avenue Northeast, Hennepin Avenue South, the full length of Lake Street, providing loans starting at $10,000 up to $37,000 for those demonstrating at least a 15% revenue loss during the time of construction in a 90-day period. Each corridor will receive $300,000 worth of funding. The program is a goodwill effort to stabilize businesses that experience significant challenges during construction, helping them recover and maintain their contributions to the local economy, and hopefully mitigate the economic strain of construction-related disruptions. I'll just close by saying our small businesses have had to shoulder a lot of burden and hardship with the hardship of a drop of revenue while construction occurs and through the closure of main thoroughways. And while improvements are necessary, there's not a legal right to recover for construction impact. And so the hope is that we can have this program to help them in their time of need. I will move this item for approval and ask for a proper second.
Second. That item has been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on amendment number 41? I will first recognize Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the authors would be amenable. Hennepin Avenue East also had a construction that was very damaging to the businesses. Could we include that in this?
Councilmember Rainville, I just looked over at my co-author and we gave each other a nod. I think we would be amenable to that inclusion for Hennepin Avenue. I have that correct, co-author?
Hennepin Avenue East.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So there are a few other colleagues in queue. I put myself in queue. I just wanted to address the question or potential questions around the source. I know this came up earlier with an amendment that was using an increased transfer from the Downtown Assets Fund. So I want to just speak to what's happening with the Downtown Assets Fund. So this year there was, based on projections from previous years, a $32 million transfer from the Downtown Assets Fund was already planned. In the mayor's recommended budget, $42 million was included as part of the transfer from the Downtown Assets Fund to pay for different expenditures within the budget. So an extra $10 million was taken by the mayor in the recommended budget from what was planned. Based on this planned transfer, the year-end projection for the fund balance in the Downtown Assets Fund for at the end of 2025 is $85.4 million. So combined, the three council amendments that take from this source add up to an additional $2.25 million, which is a quarter of the extra that was already taken by the mayor in the recommended budget. So that would mean the new 2025 year-end projection would come down to $83.15 million. The three amendments combined, their total dollar value is about 2.6% of the overall fund balance projection for 2025. This amendment accounts for 1% of the projected year-end balance. So I understand the hesitation on using this source, but wanted to put that into the context of what is available. And with that, I will recognize Councilmember Cashman, followed by Councilmember Osman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I agree. Forgivable loan program for businesses who have endured hardship and reconstruction is a good idea. And actually, there are conversations happening about state legislators wanting to move the state toward funding this. And I don't know if they're going to be able to get that done this year. So I appreciate the effort towards creating this at the city. And again, I just have to vote no because of the source, which I've communicated to the authors. I don't believe that we should be taking Downtown Assets Fund for work that doesn't actually support downtown and the growth of that fund.
Thank you. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Osman, followed by Councilmember Jenkins.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Is this the past constructions or the future constructions?
Councilmember Chowdhury, would you like to address that question?
Council Vice President, I think you might be better equipped to answer this one.
Yes. So it is both. It's both ones that have been affected by construction and are going to be affected by construction in the upcoming year.
Okay. I see this is only focused on some areas, which I agree. I think being a biz chair, I remember a couple of business owners that were struggling with Lowry Avenue Northeast who had a major construction and they couldn't even get their delivery trucks go through that. It was very challenging, and also same thing with Lake Street, East and West, that had that major construction going on. But we do have major other streets that have scheduled constructions like Franklin Avenue. Will that be something that we can include on this?
Councilmember Osman, the thought here was, of course, every year the city is going to be impacted by major reconstruction in corridors across the city, and that is a good thing. We're maintaining our infrastructure. But in order to support businesses that are impacted by construction, we have to start somewhere. To establish some sort of program that provides these types of loans. And so the thought was to start with these three in different parts of our city, affecting several wards, so that we can then begin to understand exactly what the cost of something like this would be in order for it to be effective in its goal. And so that was generally the thought, was to include something in South Minneapolis, something in Uptown, something in North Minneapolis, so that all communities across the city can experience a benefit, and that the learnings from those different experiences can inform a more long-term plan or project moving forward.
And then this major streets or constructions are mainly Hennepin County. Is there, maybe Dr. Hansen can answer, is there programs that Hennepin County owned roads that have mainly the ones that were mentioned here? Are there programs that they do for business support, that businesses that have been impacted by the construction?
Chair Chugtai, Councilmember Osman, there are no financial support programs for businesses that are in construction areas from Hennepin County, state of Minnesota, or the city of Minneapolis right now.
Okay. I thought that I would know that we definitely need the Hennepin County to step in, because these businesses here have been affected hugely, and they are struggling, and I think this is a good way for the city of Minneapolis to set a good example of supporting these businesses, and I'm hoping that in the future we will have some kind of help with these businesses that are struggling. Some of this constructions just come along with no planning for some of the businesses, and now they are struggling, and some of them might be closed because of the construction that took place. I remember a good example of Lowry Avenue that came through the community. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just note that Hennepin Avenue South is a city-led reconstruction project. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Jenkins, followed by Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really think we need to be helping small businesses in construction areas. They really struggle with these issues. And when I say we, I mean government, Hennepin County, state of Minnesota, DEED, etc. I know that I mean, the Director Hanson said there are no currently any programs, but historically or in the past, there have been supports for small businesses along University Avenue when the light rail went in St. Paul, along Lake Street when we reconstructed Lake Street. And so there is some historical precedence for this, but I would like to see the plan more broadly. I mean, we're going to continuously have road construction projects. I mean, that's not going away, and they will be on business corridors. And, you know, quite frankly, we could have 38th and Chicago in there right now, but that got booted or delayed, or I don't know when that's going to happen. But I do know that when that construction happens, those businesses will need some support. And I hope it happens sometime in the next decade, but those businesses will need support, and other businesses. So I'm just struggling with this very limited approach to this amendment.
Thank you. Councilmember Chowdhury, would you like to address that at all?
Thank you. And I mean, I agree with you, Councilmember Jenkins. It would be very nice to expand this across multiple corridors. I think given the limited amount of resources, and also we as authors had a discussion of how much we wanted to end up taking from downtown assets to redistribute. We were like, where are corridors where we can point at past and present hardship and get some good data and information back from our CPED department. We're hoping that through the program that they've done before, they can utilize that to develop giving forgivable loans. I personally looked at what was done in the past for 38th and Chicago, and I mean, come time, I would be very supportive of additional funding going to 38th Chicago, both in this format and then 38th Street Thrive.
Thank you. And then finally, I will recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The use of downtown assets funds is an increase to our spending as a city. It's an increase to the budget. This is one time, so it's just for construction work then happening in the next year. I've got a lot of questions, and it might be for the city attorney or it might be for COO Anderson Kelleher. Are we allowed to use downtown assets fund for economic support to businesses that would be considered outside the downtown core? I'm not sure that that is even allowable. I do know we used it to decrease our budget levy to the extent the mayor found tolerable. This is another almost $1 million from it. So I guess nobody's getting up or jumping in to help me answer that. But I tried very hard, I'll say, to work with the city attorney's office to figure out how to create a victim services funds for victims of domestic violence and intimate partner assaults. In the end, I was told that although it's a laudable goal, a program like that would not meet our public purpose guidelines because it benefited an individual. How would a forgivable loan program like this be any different?
Welcome, COO Anderson Kelleher, if you can begin by introducing yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Margaret Anderson Kelleher, City Operations Officer, City of Minneapolis. I will take the first part of your question. There are three major funds funded through the Downtown Assets Fund, or taxes that come into it. There is one tax, the entertainment tax, that's been in place since 1968. That is the most flexible portion of the tax. It does not have the number of restrictions on it. We do have policy, though, that guides how we utilize those dollars. And those dollars historically have been used for items within the downtown area, the downtown assets, but it does have some flexibility. The other two portions of the tax do not have that sort of flexibility on them. And the funds are commingled.
that. How will we know if this forgivable loan program can be used outside of the downtown core, but how can we say that this would meet something like public purpose when we couldn't have a domestic service victims fund meet public purpose?
Chair,
Deputy City Attorney Nielsen.
Chair Chuck Ty, Councilmember Palmisano. I think there's a difference between programmatic creation with eligible parties and having a forgivable loan program or a grant program that's created through that versus something construed differently, which might just be a gift, primarily benefiting a private individual. And public purpose doctrine, you have to have both public purpose and authority. And I'll note that a lot of our authority is, especially in the economic development realm and the housing realm, is rooted in both statute and the laws and financial policies regarding, in this case, the Downtown Assets Fund.
Thank you. You know, after having just been through several major construction projects over the past few years that frankly devastated some of the local businesses in Southwest Minneapolis, I am keenly aware for the need of some type of forgivable loan program. I was getting asked that at least twice a week throughout the entirety of our E-Line bus rapid transit system. Why would this, for the authors, why would this not apply to anybody along the E-Line bus rapid transit system? And I will note that the E-Line spans 13.3 miles from University Avenue, 4th Street, Hennepin, and France Avenues. Perhaps that's why this should be more of a state-level thing. Thank you, Councilmember Cashman, for mentioning that, because it should apply to Metro Transit projects too. And what I told my small business owners is this work disrupted their lives for 4 months, longer than we promised them it would. This took away the livelihood in front of their businesses for 4 months longer than what we promised them. A good chunk of the E-Line, about 25%, is in the 13th Ward. And I really try to get others to see that as a $15 million investment in our community. I think that's something to celebrate. But to business owners, it's been painful, and they have struggled. There is a small, very small, Indian restaurant, Raj, for example, and the owner, Sohail, had numerous media interviews over the summer about how he was about to lose his business because of Metro Transit's E-Line construction work, shutting down the intersection, removing all of the parking in front of his restaurant. For all these owners, our 2% loan program is available to them. Metro Transit also offers the same 2% loan program, but that wasn't seen as being particularly helpful. So it sounds like CPED has the ability to create and implement such a program, but I'm curious about its capacity. Would the capacity would it use existing staff in an overextended way? The same staff that we declined to give a cost of living adjustment, like we did to every other represented group in our city? How could we not be inclusive of Metro Transit projects? What about the Blue Line extension? That's coming up, but this is just going to be a one-time, one-year thing. My point is this: more broadly, you are choosing winners and losers in this. We have no sense of how popular a program like this might be, how many businesses might win the lottery of this versus those who don't. How will we even venture to begin how to determine who's most at need for this type of support? I have 32 seconds left, and I'll get back in queue for any of the authors to answer these questions. How do we determine who's most at need for this type of support? Because it greatly exceeds $900,000.
I mean, I think that is determined by program design. And again, like the goal here was to start somewhere. I'm not saying that $900,000 is going to address every need in all three of these corridors, but the same could be said about every single program that we have in the city, right? That we are a part of funding. They don't all fully address the need that they're seeking to. Councilmember Palmisano for your second speech.
Don't you think that business owners in our city should be entitled to this regardless of whether they're on their curb is encumbered by E-Line Metro Transit installation or by the Hennepin reconstruction project that's being done by the city?
I don't understand the question you're trying to get at.
I'm trying to get to the point that business disruption in the public right-of-way is business disruption in the right-of-way, and it should be fairly considered across all of the different needs for commercial corridors in our city. So did you deliberately not include bus rapid transit installation, or could you include that in this budget amendment of yours?
Councilmember, this budget amendment is narrowly focused on 3 corridors that affect multiple wards and geographies across the city, and some of those include installations of infrastructure by Metro Transit in some sort of way, as is the case with Hennepin Avenue South and the E-Line, or with Lake Street and B-Line. But this is the proposal that we came up with. It is in front of you for consideration. This isn't saying someone has a need and someone doesn't.
So, Madam Chair, would you be willing to include the rest of the E-Line extension in this budget amendment?
This is including all of Hennepin Avenue.
It does not include all of the E-Line extension that goes through my ward.
Yep, because that's the corridor that's affected by major reconstruction in that is included here.
It's very fair to say that businesses in my community have been deeply affected.
I'm not
road
arguing
shut
with that.
down for the entire summer. And I do think they would be interested in applying to this type of help, just like other businesses. I don't think we are choosing winners and losers here. We are saying people in these 3 corridors is where we're going to start. We're going to do it just next year, and I find that to be incredibly unfair. I don't see that meeting public purpose arguments, and I don't approve of using the Downtown Assets Fund as its source.
Understood. Councilmember Rainville.
I just want to circle back to we're including Hennepin Avenue East, because you keep saying 3, so it'll be 4 corridors.
Sure,
Or
sure. I think
one
it'll be
long
Hennepin Avenue
Got
East
it,
and South.
got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Finally, I will recognize. All right, sounds good. With that, colleagues, we have the Small Business Support for Construction and Hardship Amendment offered by Council Members Chowdhury and Chugtai in front of us. Mr. Clerk, will you call the roll on the revised amendment number 41?
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vita.
No.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
No.
Jenkins.
Nay.
Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
No.
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chugtai.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes and 4, or excuse me, there are 9 ayes and 4 nays.
That motion carries. All right, amendment number 42 is the Street Vendor Entrepreneur Grant and Compliance Program amendment offered by Council Members Chavez and Chowdhury. I will recognize Councilmember Chavez to please introduce and move approval of your amendment.
Thank you, Council Vice President Chugtai. I'm bringing this forward with Council Member Chowdhury, which seeks to provide a pathway for food vendors in the city to legally operate, contribute to the local economy, and create a more inclusive and thriving street vending environment. This proposal will directly assist food vendors by helping them with business startup costs to acquire the necessary means to comply with city regulations and to operate their business. This ensures that vendors can continue to sell fresh food and snacks while adhering to health and safety standards to protect the community at large. It will also fund a sidewalk food cart street vending permits, which are essential for food vendors to operate in designated areas in our city. And with that, I will approval of this item.
Amendment number 42 has been, Councilmember Chavez has moved approval of this item. Is there a second?
Second.
That item has been properly moved and seconded. Colleagues, is there any discussion or questions related to this item? I will first recognize Councilmember Palmisano, followed by Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to point out that this is the third of 4 amendments that use our ARPA revenue replacement funding as its source. This is otherwise a source that would have reduced the current levy. It would have reduced the property tax levy by another 0.15%, but this body voted against that proposal in order to propose new programming that will increase our total budget. Even if it's not used this year for levy reduction, those funds could fall to the bottom line and could also be used next year to buy down the levy. We are declining 2 chances to lower the levy for our residents, for business owners and property owners. Let's be clear about that. Councilmember Chavez, or possibly the city clerk, could you remind me of where this ordinance is in the legislative process?
So, Member Palmisano, we are working with staff to get this up and running by the spring of 2025. And I have been very clear of that throughout the council term.
This will be a brand-new allowable business concept in our city. It will take a while to get up and running on that work. Can you tell me more about the technical assistance that would help street vendors, how we as a city make sure that we have reg services and making sure that street vendors are selling safe food?
So this would be working with an organization, and this would be administered by the health department, who will help get people into compliance and will also help them with micro business startup costs to ensure they had food compliant cards. So this is meant to also work with a trusted organization that can work with these vendors to ensure that they are in compliance when this new ordinance is in place.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious, has there been conversations with the Minneapolis Park Board? I know a lot of times I see vendors near the parks, and many of our parks have restaurants and food vendors, etc. Have we had conversations with them about this ordinance?
Councilman Jenkins.
Or a potential ordinance.
Sorry.
It's not even an ordinance yet. Thank you.
Can you repeat the first part? If I've had conversations with who again?
Have we had conversations with the Minneapolis Park Board? Yeah.
So, in our conversations with the Park Board and other governmental agencies, it's always been clear that Minneapolis has to also establish its own work. And if Minneapolis commits to doing its own work, they will be committed to doing their own part in the parks. So we've been working really hard to establish an ordinance and working in collaboration with staff. We don't always agree, that is very clear, but we are trying to work together to address this issue that is impacting a community. We meet bi-weekly, and I'll give you your time back, but we have had conversations with the Park Board, and they have communicated with us that we should do our own part so they can also do their part too.
Okay. That's it. I mean, I just wanted to make sure we are having these conversations. We have many restaurants, so competition around food is healthy and good, but we have a lot of requirements on those restaurants, and, I think that, our food trucks have many requirements. They have to be in an approved kitchen, etc. They need business managers or food safety managers, and so it's going to be difficult to hold street food vendors to these same standards, but we have to have some level of standards for food, and particularly with the potential lack of oversight of our food systems that will be coming down the pipe. But thank you, sir.
Thank you. And finally, I'll recognize Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. Just a quick question for Councilmember Chavez. You had talked about helping to get in designated areas, food vendors. Do you have any idea where those designated areas would be, or is that yet to come?
Yeah, Council Vice President Chuck Chai, if I may, we are working with staff on a legislative directive that we all voted for a couple months ago, where they're going to give an update on that work to council. So once we get that report, we'll have more of a temperature check of the route we're going to go towards. Obviously, we'll have conversations with all of you here in regards to that, but we don't at this moment have an idea of where. We just know we want to be more permissive and create these permits so people can, I hear Councilmember Jenkins's concerns about the public health concerns. We want to make sure that we address those public health concerns, but we know that the current system we have right now isn't working, and we need to create different permits to allow this to be more accessible and more friendly, and also address those public health concerns too. So that is a conversation I'd be happy to have with you, as Councilmember Chowdhury would too, I bet.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Thank you. And then finally, I'll recognize Councilmember Vital.
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Chavez, I have concerns with this because we haven't voted on an ordinance yet. I really would be open to having these discussions if we had an ordinance and we knew exactly what we would be doing with such a program and how many people would be in it. There is opportunity for you to amend the budget once it has to be voted on. This is assuming that the ordinance has passed already, in my opinion, and it hasn't. It hasn't even been created. So I think waiting on this it makes more sense to me to do it after the program is established. You're saying they're going to do a study on a legislative directive on kind of the makeup of the program. We probably would have a better gauge around how many people could potentially be street vendors, or where they would want to be, and the costs associated with that. This just feels arbitrary because we don't have any of that information. It just feels like 150,000 was selected as the number, but we really don't know what we're going to be doing, and we definitely don't even know if we'll have a program established.
If I may, Council Vice President, so we're taking the same approach as the Mayor's administration. The Mayor's administration allocated funding for speed cameras, even though an ordinance hasn't passed and won't pass until next year. And I don't see a budget amendment in front of us that's removing that funding when the ordinance isn't in place. So we're doing the same exact thing there. So I take that concern seriously, but it's the same thing. The Mayor's administration put money, thousands of dollars, for a speed camera pilot program. There's no ordinance established yet, and there's no budget amendment in front of us to remove that funding because there is no ordinance. So I would say that I'm doing the same as the mayor. The second part is, in conversation with staff, we have committed, the Mayor's administration and my office and Councilmember Chowdhury have committed to passing an ordinance by spring, because we know this is going to be an issue impacting our residents. So there is alignment with the administration and our offices to make sure that this is going to be in place, and it's going to require funding. So that's my comments for that.
I think that the state is allowing us to have a pilot program for speed cameras. We've had multiple years of discussions about the pilot program for speed cameras, and we need to have the money in it. I'm not going to get into a debate with you about what the mayor is doing and how the mayor is doing it. I'm talking about this very specific thing that's before us, because there is no program established. And I understand you all are committed to making this happen, but there's got to be a majority vote for it to happen. And it's not like you can't amend the budget. You've done it many times where you've amended the budget for programs or for organizations when it's not budget season. So it's not like it can't happen. It just feels arbitrary. It just feels like what's $150,000 going to do, and how many people is it going to serve? Is it going to, what are you doing with it?
I already mentioned what I'm going to do with it. We need an ordinance in place to have the speed camera pilot program. That it's the same thing, and I just don't see a difference in that, and I'll just leave it at that.
All right. And then Councilmember Chavez, were you hoping?
Nope.
Okay. With that, I will recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Madam Chair, sometimes the devil is in the details here. There's a lot of public purpose problems with, for example, gifting somebody a food cart or gifting somebody equipment to make something licensable. There are state law changes that go with traffic cameras. There's not an equivalence here about what we're doing and how it fits all of our current agreed upon policies like our transportation action plan. But there's a lot of money headed here out to nonprofit partners and others that we're really taxing everyone in our city for, and taking it away from this particular account that was an ARPA fund replacement account that helps us to be consistent with our federal grant money. We are taxing people here to give money to organizations that will give money to individuals, and there's a lot of gifting problems associated with that. So I think there's actually a lot more work here to be done than might be originally apparent. There's also, in the conversation that I listened to about parks, the park licenses vendors in their parks. The city doesn't have a role in that. They have to be licensed. They have to have safe food protocols in order to get licensed, but then they also have to have a license to sell anything in our city parks. And that's not up to us. And that isn't happening today.
Thank you. And I see
I'll be quick. Councilmember Chavez, thank you so much. Councilmember Chavez here to solve some issue that exists in our city. If you've driven or drive on Lake Street, East Lake Street, you will have folks coming to you and selling food, trying to sell food to you when you are on that traffic light. That's a health issue. That's a huge issue. And that's where he's coming from, trying to solve that issue. And also, street food is a worldwide phenomenon. Why are we not catching up and trying to create a way for people to enjoy Minneapolis? Thank you. You're really bringing something that we are missing in our city. And the program is a pilot program, and hopefully we can learn from it. We can come up with a way that business owners and our city and our community can all thrive and enjoy the city of Minneapolis. So 100% support it. It's a good idea that's coming from you, Councilmember Chavez. Thank you.
Now, before we move to call the roll on this item, I just want to mention this now, and this is going to apply to all amendments. Every single amendment and proposal was reviewed by the city attorney's office. We had extensive conversations about the allowed use of certain types of money, the public purpose conversations. All of this has been cleared. So I just, moving forward, if we can please refrain from insinuating that these amendments have somehow not been vetted by the attorneys or are somehow illegal to do, that would be really beneficial. Now we have the Street Vendor Entrepreneur Grant and Compliance Program amendment offered by Council Members Chavez and Chowdhury before us. I will ask the clerk to call the roll on amendment number 42.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Nay.
Vita.
No.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Nay.
Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
No.
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chuktai.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes and 4 nays.
That motion carries. Next, we have amendment number 43 from Council Member Wansley. Council Member Wansley, will you please introduce and move approval of your early childhood education workforce development amendment?
Yes, thank you, Chair Chuktai. So this proposal would fund the CPED Employment and Training Division to expand workforce development and teacher training for early childhood education to increase the Minneapolis child care workforce. I think we've had extensive conversations on this year and much analysis, but it's very clear access to high quality, affordable child care has massive impacts on educational outcomes for children. But we also know that thousands of working class Minneapolis families cannot afford child care. And this is partially due to the massive shortage of childcare workers. So investing in workforce expansion and retention is crucial for increasing childcare slots and addressing the affordability crisis in childcare. CPED Employment and Training Division actually administers a competitive RFP program for workforce training programs to receive funding, and early childhood education workforce training programs have received funding in the past from this program and have had extremely successful outcomes in supporting early childhood education workers while also addressing workforce recruitment and retention challenges. And I just want to reiterate again, here's the opportunity to increase our city's investment in early childhood education workforce development programs, which is an immediate action that this body can take to improve childcare access and workforce conditions. I also want to note that my office has been in conversations in building up to this amendment with both state legislators, leadership on the Minneapolis Public Schools, the Chamber of Commerce, groups of organized parents, also child care or early childhood education providers, also like the YMCA or YWCA, who all have identified increased investments in the child care workforce as being a crucial measure that they would love to see the city help, support, and address in pertaining to, again, our child care affordability crisis. So with that, of course, I ask for a second and motion for approval.
This item, amendment number 43, has been properly moved and seconded. Colleagues, is there any discussion related to this item? I will first recognize Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. I compliment the author on identifying this need, but I will not be voting for this because of where the funding is coming from. The Community Safety Recruitment Campaign, we are under a court order to increase our police force. We're about 35% short. And this will put us in legal risk the next time we appear before the judge who's monitoring that case. We in essence would be breaking the law by not standing true to our recruitment campaign.
Thank you. And then next I will recognize Councilmember Palmisano, followed by Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This crisis for child care is a matter of cost and a lack of adequately trained child care professionals. I understand that not everyone or even most people have that financial ability or family support, the kind of support that I do. And I know the incredible financial strain that it puts on families. I would be happy to consider this proposal if an alternate funding source would be identified, but Councilmember Rainville is pointed that the funding source for this is the MPD recruitment campaign. I'm pleased at the progress we've made in hiring qualified staff for 911, and I believe we are fully staffed with use of that campaign. However, although we're making progress toward hiring more officers into MPD, we still have a long, long way to go. We are still over 150 sworn officers shy of our charter mandated minimum. I'm not sure if Commissioner Barnett would like to give us an update on this campaign and how much more hiring needs to be done, considering the good number of future officers we have in the pipeline, in the CSO and in other programs. But because of the source on this has to be a hard stop for me, and I hope that others also don't support decreasing funds that are truly helping us to recruit more officers. Thank you, Commissioner, for coming on up. Could you tell us what this comes at the expense of in the MPD recruitment campaign?
Good afternoon, Chair Chuck Ty, Councilmember Palmisano. I know that Chief O'Hara, I believe, gave an update at the Public Health and Safety Committee. I mean, you all are well aware of the shortage of police officers and what that means for our residents. The more officers we have, the better response times we have, the more we're able to respond to those calls that that aren't just priority one calls right now. You know that the officers are running from priority one to priority one calls, and our residents wait a long time for us to respond for priority 2 and 3. The campaign itself has been going, I believe, really well with the reach of what it's been doing, the digital campaign, social media campaign, with its outreach on Meta, LinkedIn, YouTube. We've been able, the video there, I just got this through beginning of September, have reached 9 million people. Those who have looked at that video, at least 15 seconds, and we have a 15-second, I believe a 30-second video. Also, impressions, meaning those people who just took a look but not necessarily looked at the video, I believe is 35 million. And so we're making progress with at least those folks who appear to have some interest in viewing that in the reach of the campaign. I think it's been good. So thank you.
Thank you. So that's the cost of this change. But just to go back to the child care need, you know, my own family had child care needs here that were full-time child care for about 10 years. And during that time, there were daycares in our city that put me on a wait list for my second child, where my second child literally aged out of that and was in kindergarten before they said, oh, we have a spot available for your second child. As well as families, you know, coming and going with me who regularly struggled to access the vouchers for people who were in great financial need, so that they could help to fund or pay for their child's daily needs, so that they could go to work. I had an opportunity to speak with Councilmember Wansley a little bit about this, because she shared her budget amendments with me and others in a very transparent way. And we spoke a lot about how that a number of people who worked at the daycare centers that my children went to were actually there because of the free or greatly reduced cost to have their family members in care at those facilities at that time. And I think that's a really important reason why people choose to go into this kind of a profession. And it's not a forever profession sometimes, but it really helps to serve their needs and the needs of their children or their stepchildren or their nieces and nephews, and et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. And next I will recognize Councilmember Wansley, followed by Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair Chuktai. So I want to reiterate a comment that you mentioned earlier, because I heard that essentially this proposal is illegal. And once again, all of these proposals have been vetted by the city attorney's office. But what I will note about the funding source is this $500,000 would be in addition to the $7 million that this body passed in ARPA funding explicitly for recruitment efforts for public safety workers, especially hard-to-fill positions back in 2022. Also, just this summer, we passed the police contract under the guise of, again, demonstrating that we're taking serious, staffing challenges and also making an effort to do recruitment. And that contract came with a $9 million price tag. So we have demonstrated, at least amongst this body, that there has been tremendous amount of resources devoted to recruitment efforts, and particularly for this one department. And I think we also need to be equitable in how and who we're investing in, and also recognizing that child care is also a major crisis for many of our residents. And I think a modest investment of $500,000, and especially when we're pairing that to the almost tens of millions of dollars that we have poured into recruitment for MPD alone, I think is a worthy investment to make that will have long-term economic benefits for families and workers in our city. And I think we have absolutely a track record in which, again, this body has fulfilled its fiduciary duties to demonstrate that, sure, we have done everything possible to meet that charter mandate. And I would hope that our city attorney's office could be able to demonstrate that. But I feel confident that we have been doing that on this body, and why I felt confident in being able to use this source. So I at least wanted to add that context and the intentionality of why we felt comfortable in using this new spending proposal in light of, again, pairing that with the other allocations we've made towards recruitment efforts, especially not only just as early as, July of this year, but also, over the past 2 years as well.
Thank you. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Chowdhury, followed by Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I also just kind of wanted to echo the point that Councilmember Wansley made about this alarming, almost false idea of legal risk. I think it's a very alarming statement to make up here that this puts us in legal risk with our settlement agreement, and so I wanted to just ask our Deputy City Attorney through the chair to confirm there's no risk if we don't do this PR Imagine recruitment campaign.
Mr. Nielsen. If you can turn on your mic, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Chugtai, Councilmember Chowdhury. Yes, I agree. Your statement is correct. I am not aware, one, of any court case where there is a court or a judge overseeing our recruitment activities, and I am also not aware of any implications regarding the same in terms of the settlement agreement with the MDHR or DOJ negotiation.
Thank you.
PR campaign specifically, sorry. I apologize.
Thank you. And I'll make my comments. When we took the presentation on about this item, I found it very staggering that there were no metrics that were shared with us to give us database information that I believe we should be able to easily collect on the efficacy and the success of a social media PR campaign that took $1 million of investment, and I requested an administrative follow-up around the specific numbers and metrics that were used. Unfortunately, what was shared with us was only information around what metrics were collected, not the actual numbers. It was shared with us that a number of click-throughs, what the metrics that were collected were the number of click-throughs from social media, survey results, number of applicants proceeding through each stage, number of applicants that translate to successful candidates. But that was not given to us, the actual metrics itself. And I that was an opportunity that was there to prove to this body that we should continue investment in this PR campaign. One of the reasons why I voted for the police contract alongside the ask from my constituents was in the name of recruitment and retention, and so that's why I supported that, and then have been supportive of the Pathways programs that have shown us very clearly in the way that we had our CSOs in the chamber just this last council meeting. And so I have a really hard time without appropriate metrics continuing to support this, especially when we're weighing out the need for childcare in the city of Minneapolis. So I just want to thank the author for bringing this forward. I think there is a substantial amount of data available within the packet and the proposal of why this is needed. And in a time where we have a vice president who suggested the way that we should address our childcare needs is just stay home or find a grandparent or an aunt to take care of your kids, municipalities need to step up. So I'm looking forward to supporting this today.
Thank you. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Jenkins, followed by Vice Chair Koski.
Thank you, Chair Chugtai. Earlier this summer, I attended the Hunt Institute convening in Las Vegas, Nevada. The Hunt Institute is an organization specifically devoted to early childhood education. Almost every session that I went to talked about the low pay in this industry as being a reason that there are a worker shortage, not necessarily training. And so, I would be more interested to help either families pay for childcare and or help to raise the wages of childcare workers. I'm not sure that recruitment or training is the challenge in this area. And I do 100% agree, which is the reason why I went to the conference, that child care is one of the major issues facing our city right now. And so having more child care workers, I'm not sure how that's going to help families pay their child care costs. It doesn't comport.
Councilmember Jenkins, would you like to have Councilmember Wansley address that?
Sure.
Okay. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chektai. There's also numerous data out here, and it's also included in the packet with the binder that outlines that, again, the affordability crisis that's linked to childcare is actually directly tied to the lack of workers who refuse to go into these fields because of the low pay that Council member Jenkins just named. So again, this is essentially supporting a pathways program to do the workforce development component to support getting more workers into childcare programs, and more so supporting them with getting more accreditations, because when you have more credentials and accreditations, you're able to also receive, as a childcare provider, more funding from the state as well. So this actually, again, is linked to how we're able to improve access to families, and ideally leads to that outcome of lowering the cost for families, because you do actually have workers present, as opposed to having childcare providers who, most of the owners, they're both the owner and also workers, and they don't have an array of a workforce to actually meet the needs of families right now. And that's why we have so very few slots to meet just the range of need and demand for our families. So this is why we're bringing this forward, and this is actually why programs like this has been supported in the past by CPED, because there has been those demonstrated impacts to improve that access. So I also know that this type of work is backed by data, and that's why we felt confident in moving forward with this proposal.
Thank you. Have you had conversations with child care providers? Is this what they're telling you? They don't have workers?
Yes, so also in the proposal,
or trained workers, I should say.
Yeah, Councilmember Jenkins. Yep, as I mentioned, my office, if you look here in the proposal, we met with YWCA, Head Start. Also, I met with the State Department also of Children, Youth, and families that also help provide, grants to child care centers directly. We met with the Youth Coordinating Board, who also helped us get connected with a lot of these providers who named this as an identifiable need, and basically said, we know you've provided these resources in the past. We would love to see you show up again in this way. So we've absolutely been in touch with providers who named this as a critical need.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And then next I will recognize Vice Chair Koski, followed by Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question for Director Hansen. Thank you.
Yep.
I was just wondering about the capacity or of your team to be able to utilize this funding for this type of project. I agree that it's really important, but want to understand what the plan might be and how to get those funding out.
Chair Chugtai, Councilmember Koski, our employment and training team in the Economic Development Division would take this funding, if passed, and it'd be part of its Career Pathways program. We talked to the author about that service, and typically what we'll do is offer this through a notice of funding availability, get a community-based provider. They would then do the training. We would do the administration of the contract and all the compliance checks. So we're working underneath all of our conventional workforce development program guidelines to make sure that they're efficiently doing the work. And so that oversight would be handled by existing staff.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I have another question for Commissioner Barnett as well.
Chair Chuck Ty, Councilmember Koski.
Thank you so much. So the campaign that we had previously, I know and understand from a previous presentation from the chief that it did increase the amount of people that applied, actually quite significantly from last year to this year, I think even over double, which was really exciting to hear. But what I didn't see, and maybe there is some change in this, but the hiring rate itself was just about, I believe, around 5%. And so for me, that's the outcome that I want to see. I want to see how many officers we get across the hiring line. And I didn't see that number increase. So I'm wondering how this $500,000 would help actually get good officers across the line, increase that hiring rate, and perhaps it sounded like there were a lot of barriers, and so how would this dollars reduce those barriers to getting officers across the line?
Right. The chair and then Councilmember Koski, some of the barriers that you're talking about has to do with the state requirement. It's not about our recruitment or who we hire and things like that. And so we've tried very hard to work, and I know Chief O'Hara's tried very hard to work with the post board in trying to get at least some small changes for people. And you've heard him before. You talk about people who have already graduated from college having to go back to school to get those certain requirements. So those aren't barriers that we as a city place on them. Those are requirements by the state. And so those things have to change from the state. But I was able to get some numbers from HR in which they said 420 applicants applied by viewing the campaign. 134 were eligible. 123 were referred. 73 accepted an interview, and 32 were hired. So out of 68 of the officers hired, we had 32 directly from the campaign, which means that's about a 47% of our folks who were hired came as a result of viewing the campaign.
Okay, so sorry, I might be doing my math wrong.
Yep.
You said 420 applied, 32 were hired, so that would be,
And so 68 total were hired. 32 of those that were hired came directly from the campaign.
Okay, gotcha.
If that's
so
helpful.
that's current. I mean, I thought when we talked about the 420 applications, I thought we were looking at like 1,200 applications.
No, all I'm saying is that from what I got from HR for 420 applicants, right? So there were 420 applicants that applied from viewing the campaign. So this is our social media campaign.
Okay, so this is directly related
to the campaign.
Versus some of the other data that we were told, I think
Yes.
was like 1,200
Yes.
applicants. So of the 1,200 applicants, 420 came from the campaign.
I think you can make that assumption.
Okay.
I didn't ask that question, but
Okay.
the question was, what were the applicants that we got from the campaign? Are we able to tell that information?
Okay.
And that was 420.
Okay. And so then I guess back to the question around this specific $500,000.
Yes.
How do you feel that this funding, this specific increase in funding will then continue to support making sure we get those officers across the line? And 32 or 68 is, we're getting there. Those are better numbers.
If
But
we can
I'd
keep
like
the
to-
ones that we have, that's the challenge, right? The challenge is to recruit good officers and keep good officers.
And is
right?
that 500,000 going to go towards that too? Or I just want to make sure, because we're talking about this $500,000.
Right. So this $500,000 goes to the recruitment campaign. So let's take a step back. We hired a firm, Accenture, which we hired. That contract expired. And so when that contract expired, we got all of their information, all of the print data that they had, everything that they had for that campaign. Our comms people, OCS comms people, received all of that information. And one of the things from that we're trying to do is that we know that our younger folks that are out there, the majority of them view social media. So our push has been on social media. How do we not only make that touch point on social media, but we're using other things. This is not the only
Vice Chair
thing we
Husky,
do
your time has
to
expired.
recruit,
Okay.
but we use other avenues to recruit as well.
Wonderful,
Yes.
perfect. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Councilmember Rainville and then Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you. And thank you, City Attorney, for clarifying my remarks, but I was not referring to the settlement agreement. Maybe you can help me understand, because I do not have the knowledge you do. But the city was sued to bring our police force up to 731 per the charter. And do we not have to show the court that while we do not have 731 officers, we are making efforts to get to that point?
Chair Chugtai, Councilmember Rainville, I'm trying to recall all the details of that case. I know that it is no longer, hanging over our heads, so to speak. That the requisite showing has been made to the court, and the case is essentially resolved at this point. But that is no longer something that would implicate your decision here on a budget move related to a PR campaign.
Thank you for making that clear. So I guess just say, I'm going to change my remark then to say that by taking away $500,000 for the recruitment is just another around the corner way to defund the police, and I will not be voting for this.
The funding for the Minneapolis Police Department has increased. Please, let's stick to facts here. I'll recognize Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Chugtai. Wow, it's just come to my attention that there are training programs for early childhood education offered by the state of Minnesota, in person and virtual. So our resident, and this is a statewide issue. And in fact, it's probably less of an issue in the Twin Cities than it is outstate, where there are in some communities, no child care services available at all. And so I'm just curious, is it a thing that we can be directing people to these existing training opportunities? Or do we have to create a whole new program specifically for the city of Minneapolis? And maybe the author would be willing to answer that.
Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you. So clarification again, we're not creating a whole new program. We're supporting the existing Career Pathways program. And then about the $10+ million that the state allocated actually went towards mostly vouchers for families at the state level. So actually, Councilmember Jenkins, the thing that you referenced earlier about getting the money directly to the centers, that is literally what state lawmakers prioritized in the most recent legislative session. So it wasn't really also just like diversifying into the workforce development programs. There are some funding going there, but there's also now things that's up in the air because they've created this new Department of Young Families and Children. So there still needs to be, and they've talked about this publicly, of like needing to develop what funding looks like in that area as they're going to this legislative session. But I want to name, again, speaking to the partners and the subject matter experts themselves, they've also said there is a need here. And even PAR, they did an analysis, and this is on LIMS. They talked about the great need here in Hennepin County and in Minneapolis around support for families and how much expensive it is. So again, this is just one of the ways in which we can show up and address the affordability crisis through addressing the workforce shortage through our existing program.
Councilmember, your mic, please.
I have no disputes with the realities of affordability of childcare. In some instances, it costs more than the cost of sending your child to a accredited university and/or college, and so it's ridiculous. But adding more trained people, I don't see how that solves the problem. And, one of the other problems we really have in our city is our taxpayers are feeling completely overburdened. Our residential homeowners are feeling completely overburdened, and they see us making all of these, quote, new programs and new spending and getting increasingly more frustrated, which I'm sure we'll hear about this evening. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. With that, Councilmember Osman, will you?
No, I was going to call the question.
Well, it looks like we're ready to call the roll.
Childcare, but all of a sudden we're talking about defending the police. I don't know, but I was going to call the question. But it sounds like nobody's behind me, so.
Perfect. With that, we have the early childhood education workforce development amendment offered by Councilmember Wansley before us. I will ask the clerk to call the roll on amendment number 43.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Nay.
Vita.
No.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Nay.
Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
No.
Vice Chair Koski.
Nay.
Chair Chuktai.
Aye.
There are 8 ayes and 5 nays.
That item carries. Colleagues, it took us about 33 minutes to dispense with that item, so perhaps we will take less time than that for the next one. Amendment number 44 is from Councilmember Chavez and myself. I will recognize Councilmember Chavez to please introduce and move approval of his Minneapolis Welcome and Labor Center amendment.
Thank you. We're bringing this forward together, Council Vice President. This will assist in conducting community engagement research and will provide funding to meet the growing needs of newcomers, immigrants, refugees, and community members in Minneapolis by helping implement the Journey to Belonging in the Twin Cities report. Over the course of the year, we have been meeting with immigrant community members to hear the ongoing needs and challenges. For example, Councilor Chowdhury and I have been meeting with food vendors in our community. Council Vice President Chuck Ty's office and I have met with day laborers on Lake Street. And many of us up here have been talking with our immigrant residents struggling with food insecurity, unemployment issues, housing concerns, and health concerns, along with folks that need support with their businesses. This proposal has come to fruition with community conversations that would help do community engagement and everything I listed above to establish a location to meet the growing needs and demands of these populations, but with the understanding that community engagement and a lot of pre-work is needed before it begins. This funding would go to the Office in Immigrant and Refugee Affairs and NCR to support the creation and a roadmap for this, where they would then come present to the City Council. And I'll move this for approval.
Councilmember Chavez has moved approval of amendment number 44. Is there a second to that motion? That item has been properly moved and seconded. Colleagues, is there any discussion related to this item? I will recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really like the idea of creating a more welcoming path to employment for immigrants and refugees and others in our city. But I need to understand a little bit better what this decrease will mean to the department. And so I'd invite up COO Anderson Kelleher to help us understand that.
Welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Palmisano, my understanding is this reduction will take away finance's ability to reimburse staff who are pursuing further education.
Ms. Anderson-Kelleher, some of our job categories require current licensing and current credentials, where people take like continuing education classes and that sort of thing. Sometimes those things are required. Would it be taking away anything like that, to your knowledge?
Madam Chair, I was just looking to make sure who is coming in the room. I know that Finance had an off-site meeting today. We only reimburse for things that are approved. So if a program is approved for an employee or is needed for their licensure or keeping up to licensure to do their work here. So general licensure generally is not covered by the City of Minneapolis, but if there's a specific licensure that you need for your job, we would cover that.
And Ms. Anderson-Kelleher, would we continue to cover that?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Palmisano, according to our feedback to all of you, no, that would be cut at this point with that $50,000 cut.
I see. I regret that it will take educational tuition reimbursement away from just this department's staff. Other than that, it would have a pretty minimal impact on department operations. So I'm curious if the authors might agree to add back in required tuition reimbursement for credentials. So these wouldn't be anything extra, but it would enable people who need to keep certain credentials. And again, I am not aware what those might be in finance and property services. I'm not sure we have the people in the room since we have an all-day off-site meeting with finance. But would you be willing to exempt that from the amount of money that you're taking for this program?
I think to answer that question, it'd be helpful to understand, is $50,000 the total allocation for this? And is it all fully used every year?
So, Madam Chair, Ms. DeSenza helped me here. First of all, the full amount is being taken here. It is for accounting techs. In the case, we have often, very junior people coming here who need to get their accounting certificate. We then reimburse them for that, and we want to train them up and keep them.
Yeah, I want to just be able to answer Councilmember Palmisano's question. So it'd be helpful to know, to understand, maybe in the last 3 years, has all 50,000 been used every year by the department?
Council Vice President Chugtai, I'll just speak. This is a newer program that CFO Dye created, I believe, in the last 2 years as an effort to increase diversity within finance and property services. So it's a reimbursement program for approved educational programs.
And in the last 2 years, has it been used entirely?
I don't have that figure off the top of my head, but we can find out for you.
If you can find out for us, because I think Councilmember Chavez and I would be incredibly amenable to reducing this amount so that we can cover what has been used, certainly. So if you can get us some figures on how much of that $50,000 allocation has been used since the program has existed, we can then answer Councilmember Palmisano's question, and I'm naming now we are amenable to making that change.
Thank you. It feels like pretty necessary training. We say we want to develop people into careers here at the city, and then saying that, no, you have to come with this credential and we won't be helping your training to pay for it seems so very inconsistent with other programs. I'm curious why you, in looking across the board for funding, chose finance and property services specifically to take this from.
I'm happy to speak to that. So when this amendment was initially submitted, it was, I think the cut was actually coming from somewhere else in the department within Finance and Property Services. And at the department's request, we shifted to this as the source. So, I mean, I didn't go and pick exactly where this cut would come from. But again, I totally agree with what you're saying, and that is the reason for being amenable to the change.
Thank you. I hope you would also be amenable to maybe pulling this in so that we do it at the end after we have some more information in front of us, and maybe could find other extraneous information in other departments in places that they haven't used training budgets in the past.
Sure. We'll continue with discussion. We'll see if we have an answer from Director DeSenza by the time we get through the next two authors, and then we will we can table this. So with that, I will recognize Council Member Osman.
Thank you. A council member who is an immigrant, refugee, and a newcomer to state of Minnesota and also city of Minneapolis. I just want to talk about how important it is to making Minneapolis a welcoming city. Our immigrants bring so much to our community. They contribute a lot of money, a lot of tax. They start new businesses. They create revenue for the city of Minneapolis. And for this $50,000, having that program and making them feel welcome and making sure that we have this department's actually underfunded. They only had one full-time staff last year, thanks to this council members who added last year one another staff. We are getting immigrants that are coming in the community, that are creating jobs, that are contributing a lot to the community. So I just want to talk about the importance of immigrants. And when we talk about importance of program or immigrants, we're not really, trying to say where we're getting the source is less important. Everything we fund is very important, but just want to highlight that it's crucial that, especially the time we're in, and who's in the White House, to make our community feel welcome, and to make our city a place that welcomes everyone. And immigrant office that we have in the city of Minneapolis has done a lot of work. They have created a lot of services. My office gets contacted for immigrant issue. I have no experience with immigrant issue, but what I do is I direct them to answer some of the questions, and it's very important that we are supporting this creation of Welcome and Labor Center. And I think it would be wonderful to see somewhere in Lake Street an office or a place that new immigrants can go and get feel welcome. So just wanna highlight that it's important, and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Could you please also add me as a co-author for this?
Yes, absolutely. Clerks, if we can note that Councilmember Osman is added as a co-author to amendment number 44. Councilmember Palmisano, I see that you are in queue. Is it okay if we pause just for a second so we can see if we have an answer from the budget team? Not yet. Go ahead, and then after your comments, we'll just begin. We'll hold this until we have an answer, and we'll move on to number 45.
Sure. That's actually why I was in queue, is because I saw Director Dye come into the room. But I am curious, I guess, from the authors, why one time? We can't create a welcome center for just 1 year and then shut it down.
Can I answer?
Why would we be doing this with just one-time money? That seems to be another thing that increases the budget ongoing next year and increases our burden in future years.
I can answer that question. We really wanted to just take an approach of actually engaging with the community to see how we could develop this. And this was in hopes of trying to implement the report that addresses immigrant concerns across St. Paul, Minneapolis. So this is just to help do that engagement and see what it could look like. We know that there are many different communities represented in the immigrant community, different kind of engagement that we need to do. So this is just to start it up and see what it could look like in the future. So it's just one time, and yeah. Oh, and it's 50,000.
So this is the planning for such a welcome center. I want to point out that I was here when the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs was created, and it was never meant to just have one person in it. Our one person leverages so much navigation to all of the different nonprofits that offer things like free immigration help, legal aid, these kinds of things for people in our community, which you, Councilmember Chavez, are certainly well versed in, probably more current than I am in it. But it concerns me, so this would be like a report, or this would be what it would take to create a physical location for people to come to, or some such thing.
It could be, and then through the engagement, that could obviously change, and there might be a different direction that NCR and OIRA might go towards. It might just be a place that they rent out. It could be completely different, but we want to make sure that we establish something and we'll put funding towards, so we can, one, be careful on our approach, but two, make sure that we're actually going to be doing this in the future.
Thank you. So this is establishing a new service, and I appreciate it comes with money, because I don't think that Director Rivero probably has much time to add this to her docket of things that are done. I'll just stop, because the rest of my time would have been for Director Dye.
All right, okay, perfect. And then Councilmember Palmisano, I'll just note, there are actually 2 staff members in the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. That was a change that was made in the last budget.
I'm well aware. Thank you. I'm well
I
aware.
heard you say there's 1 person in the department.
I said it began with 1 person in the department. It now has 2 people in the department. Director Rivero, I think, would be leading the work of this type of a center, but if with $50,000, she might just outsource it.
Sure. Director DeSenza, do you have an answer to the question?
Chair Chugtai, I have a partial answer to the question, looking at a recent accounting report for the department. We believe there's about $35,000 in spending in the current year, but it's important to note that because it's reimbursement, the payments happen at the end of the semester.
Sounds good. So this is helpful. I think I have a solution and a path forward here. During discussion, I had a chance to talk with our city clerk, Casey Carl, who is the head of our city's legislative department, and he just offered very graciously, knowing that this is something that's important to members of this body, and knowing that prioritizing welcoming the immigrants into our community is a priority for this body, that this is a small enough one-time cost that can be absorbed into the Legislative Department Office of City Clerk's budget. So if it is okay with everyone here, I'm going to amend on the fly. I know how much you hate this. I'm sorry, clerks. We are going to we're going to change the source here, so from Finance and Property Services Executive to Legislative Department, Office of City Clerk, with whatever fund code, wherever is appropriate for you. And if that works for everyone, I'm not seeing any further discussion, so number 44 as amended to change the source to the Office of City Clerk. Amendment number 44 is before us, and I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vito.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chugtai.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That item carries. Amendment number 45 is from Council President Payne. I will recognize Council President Payne to please introduce and move approval of your Civil Rights Implementation Staff Amendment.
Thank you, Vice President Chugtai. This amendment is moving resources out of the City Attorney's Office and into the Office of Civil Rights. This is in support of our ongoing settlement agreement and consent decree work. We've had this conversation on a previous amendment of mine, but a lot of this work was very heavily front-loaded to the city attorney's office as we were in the negotiation phase. As we're all well aware here up on the dais, we are getting closely towards the end of negotiation phase and hopefully having agreed upon settlement consent decree with the DOJ. But we are fully in implementation mode for the settlement agreement, and that body of work is largely owned by the police department, which we've made significant investments into. So that's probably the biggest source of the police department budget growing, is the additional staff that we've allocated towards implementation of the settlement agreement. But there's a huge body of work in the civil rights department that I think, if you all recall, we just recently approved a contract for an independent investigator so that they could work against the large backlog of cases that have not gone through intake yet. And so that backlog exists because of many, many years of underinvestment in the Civil Rights Department, where these cases were coming in at a faster rate than we could get through the intake on those. And so one of the things that we should all anticipate and actually hope for is an increase, an uptick in the number of cases coming in through OPCR. Those would be the civilian-based complaints, as opposed to a complaint into internal affairs. Internal affairs has staffed up quite significantly as we've invested in settlement agreement implementation. We haven't had that same level of investment in civil rights, and so this amendment is building a strong foundation for the future of implementing both the settlement agreement and the consent decree.
Council President Payne has moved approval of amendment number 45. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
That item has been properly moved and seconded. Colleagues, is there any discussion or questions related to this item? I'll recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was seeing who else might jump into queue ahead of me. This is a really steep cut to the city attorney's office, especially in conjunction with the FTE that was already taken from them in amendment number 9. This is 3 FTEs from the civil side, and there's another FTE on the criminal side coming up in amendment number 65. So I'd like to ask the city attorney if she'd be willing to come up. I'd like her to advise us as to how these cuts might impact her office.
Welcome, City Attorney Anderson. If you would please begin by introducing yourself.
Madam Chair, council members, Kristen Anderson, City Attorney. So first of all, my understanding of amendment number 65 is that's coming out of our contractual services budget and not personnel budget.
That is correct.
So just to clarify that. So the impact of this particular amendment, my understanding is that it's looking for a lead assistant city attorney and assistant city attorney vacant positions. The lead position is actually in the criminal division budget. We'll figure that out on the back end. But essentially, the impact is that I've delayed doing any promotions in my office because we were so close to going over budget because of those unanticipated raises out of the market study that the council had approved. And so we were going to use that lead position to make some promotional decisions, so we will not do that in terms of the vacant assistant city attorney position. That's taking away capacity always puts us in a position of not being able to do as much. We were in the process of trying to fill that position. We did actually have a failed search, so we have a vacancy, and we will just do without.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Attorney Anderson. I'm a little worried that our city attorney's office is becoming an ever more tenuous place to work. I'm curious if Commissioner Barnett would be willing to come up. It looks like he isn't here. I'd be curious how these positions, maybe City Attorney Anderson is well equipped to answer them. Aren't these positions necessary for the success of our implementation and reform work? If they're not necessary, why did we allocate them in the first place? Were we just trying to take a swag at it last year?
Council Vice President, Council Member Palmisano. So So the positions that this would be taking from are vacancies. Our implementation work continues on. We frankly have just as much implementation work as we ever have. These are legal documents, and so that's always going to require work from the city attorney's office. But the way that sort of our hiring and positions go, we don't have specific FTEs that are, implementation team FTEs or what have you. They're just assistant city attorney, senior assistant city attorney, lead assistant city attorney positions. The two that we're looking at for this are vacant at the moment. So it would be taking 2 vacant FTEs out of the total city attorney's complement. I don't anticipate, I'm not laying anybody off. And the implementation team, I'm going to deal with this through giving up vacant positions to another department that I know has a need.
Thank you. I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate hearing from the city attorney directly on it. I was quite reluctant to be supportive of such cuts to the city attorney's office. It sounds like the city attorney already has a plan for it. So, thank you.
Colleagues, with that, we have the Civil Rights Implementation Staff Amendment offered by Council President Payne before us. I will ask the clerk to call the roll on Amendment number 45.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wamsley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vita. Aye. Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chugtai.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That motion carries. Amendment number 46 is also from Council President Payne. I will recognize Council President Payne to please introduce and move approval of your civil rights training and administrative support amendment.
Thank you, Vice President Chugtai. This is building on the theme of our last amendment that we just approved of looking at the long-term success of implementation of the settlement agreement and consent decree. Again, this is related to this big backlog that we have in intake right now, which we are hoping to work through hiring outside counsel to help work through that backlog. Once we get through that backlog, both from OPCR and IA, we're going to run into a whole nother bottleneck within civil rights. Within the CCPO. So both of those different complaint workflows arrive at a panel for CCPO. One thing that's going to be upcoming in the draft language for this has been shared with CCPO commissioners is expanding the CCPO membership so that we can have more people available to sit on those panels and work through those cases. Even on our existing number of members in CCPO, civil rights just lacked the resources to make sure that all those commissioners are getting the training, and especially as we're going to be expanding OPCR, there's going to be some additional training necessary for them as well. So this is about bringing capacity into the Civil Rights Department so that we can skill up both our commissioners and professional staff as it relates to this body of work. This is coming from the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Racial Equity Framework proposal that we had discussed in a previous amendment.
Council President Payne has moved approval of amendment number 46. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
That item has been properly moved and seconded. Colleagues, is there any discussion or questions related to this item? I will recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't go back and talk again about the benefits of the racial equity framework, but this is the second of 3 amendments that cut the racial equity framework proposal from REIB. Again, the narrative for this amendment states REIB current operations will not be significantly impacted by this proposal. Maybe current operations won't be impacted, but the framework is the only new spending proposal this small department was given. These 3 amendments total the entire proposal and render the framework completely unfunded. How on earth can that be characterized as not having significant impact?
are you asking a question?
I'm asking a question to the authors.
Sure. Council President Payne, would you like to address Councilmember Palmisano's question?
Yeah, I mean, this is not existing programming, so this was a new budget request that was in the mayor's recommended budget, so we are not taking money from existing programming. We are reprioritizing what we think is the most urgent need. I think that two consent decrees is one of our most urgent racial equity crises in the city of Minneapolis.
But it does have a significant impact to the work that was proposed through this budget process. We can't take amendments here, colleagues, as standalone proposals. As I mentioned yesterday, we have to balance the long-term needs of our city versus the impact of these decisions that we're making. The motion for this amendment says for training and administrative expenses for appointed boards and commissions. But it appears it's only very specific appointed boards and commissions within a certain department. So boards and commissions are managed through the clerk's office, but this funding is for civil rights. How many boards and commissions are staff supported by civil rights? Do we know?
Mr. Clerk, do you want to speak to this?
I'm sorry, I wasn't fully paying attention. What I heard is how many boards and commissions are supported by the Department of Civil Rights?
Correct.
Exactly.
I believe that the current number is 2. I mean, the director is in the audience.
It's 3.
Okay, I know that there's the Civil Rights Commission and there is the Community Commission on Police Oversight. Oh, and the Workplace Advisory Committee.
So this is just for CCPO training, I presume?
That's the greatest need, in my opinion, but I think there is a dearth of training needs across all those commissions.
Mr.
City
President,
Clerk?
I would just add to that. I think this body is aware that when we created the CCPO, because of the unique nature of that body, there were some funds that were set aside. Those are one-time funds, and we used those to provide comprehensive training in association with the National Association of Law Enforcement Oversight by Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, I think, NACL. I'm going to struggle with the name, but NACL. And we not only used those fundings to bring representatives from NACL to Minneapolis to provide comprehensive training for the CCPO commissioners, but we also were able to use those funds, I believe, and the director can correct me if I'm wrong, to send some of our commissioners to the annual NACL conference for training and ultimately certification. So my expectation is that while there are those 3 boards, there is clearly a heightened need for this funding for the Community Commission on Police Oversight, CCPO, and that this funding would enable that type of training and support to be continued. And the director can certainly come forward and correct me where I might be wrong, but I having that experience, wanted to put that out there for the rest of you, that money has been very helpful to us with the CCPO.
Yeah, I agree that we need to provide training for CCPO so they can meet the needs of OPCR, of our conduct review cases, and I'm in full support of that. What I mostly struggle with here is the source. I cannot support this at the cost of a major line of work in one of our smallest departments whose goal is to create the framework for us to become an anti-racist city enterprise. I'd be happy to consider alternate funding if alternate funding is identified. I also need to point out that this is just one-time funding, and the needs for CCPO will continue over time. We are going to continue to need to train people who term on and off this board, and that should be some type of ongoing funding, not some one-time allocation here.
I'm going to, I'll recognize Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. However, I am in queue for Councilmember Ellison, and he is not back yet. So I don't know what to do with that.
It sounds like we are ready to call the roll then on this item unless Councilmember Ellison appears in the next 5 seconds. I don't see him. All right.
I'm not going to filibuster on his behalf.
Councilmember Jenkins.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I do just want to express my concern for the REIB department, which, I just been working really hard to create this division, and seemingly it's being decimated, depth of 1,000 cuts. Yeah, I just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Thank you. I understood, Councilmember Ellison, that you had some comments related to amendment number 46, civil rights, training, staff, and implementation. Sounds good.
No, I just wanted to know how many people are in queue.
Got it. Understood. In that case, we have the civil rights, training, and administrative support amendment offered by Council President Payne before us. I will ask the clerk to call the roll on amendment number 46.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley. Aye. Rainville.
Nay.
Vito.
No.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Nay.
Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
No.
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chuktai.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes and 4 nays.
That motion carries. Colleagues, we have started picking up the pace here. Let's continue with that momentum with the 34 minutes we have left of this committee, please. Next is amendment number 47, which is offered by Councilmember Cashman and myself. I will recognize Councilmember Cashman to please introduce and move approval of your technical assistance for Uptown revitalization amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm so happy that we've reached this amendment for Uptown. So as we've discussed a lot today, commercial corridors and nodes that we know as Uptown have faced significant challenges in the last few years because of retail patterns, Hennepin Avenue reconstruction, civil unrest, etc. This technical assistance panel effort is a process that the city has initiated in other corridors in recent years, including in the warehouse district last year, as well as at the Kmart site a few years back. It's been really successful, and I participated in the warehouse district TAP. It's been really successful in bringing stakeholders together to vision the future of a commercial corridor. So in order to achieve this, the city would issue an RFP to identify an external party to convene land use and economic revitalization experts, community stakeholders, and other entities to examine the current conditions in Uptown, identify opportunities, develop actionable recommendations for the city and other stakeholders to get Uptown back on track to its full strength. And again, many of you should be familiar with what this looks like from the corridors that we've done this in recent years. So the funding would support, one, a contractual services for convening the technical assistance process and reporting, and two, the participation of key community-based and neighborhood organizations. And to get ahead of questions I know folks will have, the source is the BTAP program. We've discussed that today. There was additional funding and a designation for Uptown in the mayor's recommended budget, and it was an additional $100,000 for BTAP in Uptown. I talked with several stakeholders, including BTAP providers in Uptown, who agreed that this visioning stakeholder process would be a useful investment of half of that funding. So while you will see in the staff response that this would limit some of the Uptown businesses that would be able to access BTAP resources, this is a really proactive way to get those stakeholders at the table and to solve problems together. And with that, I will ask for the love of Uptown to please support this amendment, and I'll move approval.
Councilmember Cashman has moved approval of amendment number 47. Is there a second?
Second.
That item has been properly moved and seconded. Colleagues, is there any discussion or questions related to this item? I will recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I must say that I appreciate that this amendment decreases funding from one Uptown area economic development investment in order to fund a different investment in Uptown. So thank you for keeping that impact local. And thank you for wanting to look at the broader needs of the area as a whole. I have a question, I guess for Director Anderson Kelleher, or I think for Director Anderson Kelleher. Sorry, I did not see you, Director Hansen. I'm curious, Director, does CPED have the organizational ability to create this proposal?
Chair Chuktai, it's Great to be back. Councilmember Palmisano. We have done this twice before. We will work with, with existing staff to issue the RFP. We've worked with unique providers in the past for the one in Warehouse District, and then we did an RFP for the one at Kmart. We do an RFP for this one, but we would just use our typical staff. This is within our community development staff work plan, as well as our small business team.
Thank you. And would this require an open RFP process for a vendor?
Through the chair, Councilmember Palmisano, yes.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions or discussion, colleagues, we have the technical assistance for Uptown revitalization amendment offered by Councilmember Cashman and myself before us. I will ask the clerk to call the roll on amendment number 47.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vita.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chuktai.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That motion carries. Colleagues, we are making excellent time. Next is amendment number 48, which is offered by Council members Payne, Koski, and Chowdhury. I will recognize Council President Payne to please introduce and move approval of your labor standards co-enforcement amendment.
Thank you, Vice President Chugtai. If you recall, I think every budget year since I've been elected, I've been trying to get sustainable funding for our LSAD group within the Civil Rights Department for co-enforcement. Each year, there was always the argument that it was fully funded using ARPA funds, and that we would address this once those ARPA funds ran out. Last budget cycle, I tried to address the sustainable funding. Instead, we got a legislative directive that I co-authored with Councilmember Koski, and did Councilmember Chowdhury co-author that as well, perhaps? Yeah. Where we wanted to look for what would be a good sustainable source of funding. That was through our business licensing. We worked with administrative staff to try to get that implemented. There needed to be some technical work for that to be fully implemented by this budget cycle. So, and there was a bit of a disconnect in working with budget team and finance team and CPED and civil rights when it came to making those connections. So this amendment is essentially setting us up to make that connection using general fund from the CPED department, so that as we go into next year, we can do that fee study to make sure that the business license fees are representative of making this that sustainable source of funding.
Council President Payne has moved approval of amendment number 48. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
That item has been properly moved and seconded. Colleagues, is there any discussion on this item? I'll recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a huge cut to CPED, and it is ongoing funding. The staff response memo indicates that this reduction in funding would result in longer periods of time to receive a building permit, less frequent calls back to customers, and longer wait times for construction inspections. This is one of the basic services that we provide as a city. These are all very necessary things that already, in my opinion and in my experience, take too long. They support investment, economic investment in our city. I hear from constituents and businesses in my ward with regularity about their issues with getting timely responses, and this is only going to make it worse. So I guess my question is again for Director Hansen. Have I misrepresented any of the concerns that were mentioned as a response to taking $500,000 ongoing, and would this mean any cuts to staff?
Yeah. Chair Chugtai, Councilmember Palmisano. Yeah, this is a big cut to the Development Services Division. Development Services is pretty lean. It's about staffing And so it's the planned review, or MDR, Minneapolis Development Review, that is, and construction code services. To be honest with you, if you pass this amendment, we're going to have to look at it at a department level. We are not, it would have impact on staffing levels. We're not willing to do that right now. It would have to have impact somewhere else in the department.
Yeah, thank you. I have a hard time reaching this department. It's not because they're lax in getting back to me. It's because they're already running around trying to keep up with all of the requests coming at them. I do see Director Phillips here, and I know that you're relatively new here. This new amount of funding, which would be $500,000 per year, up from $183,000 per year, that's nearly triple, about triple. I'm curious if that is the amount of funding necessary to do a robust level of co-enforcement. I'm not sure how this amount of money was specifically scoped. The author might also want to chime in on it, but from the director's perspective, does this triple the amount start to be adequate for doing the amount of co-enforcement that we're trying to do here?
Michelle Phillips, Director of Civil Rights. There were a couple of questions that you had through the chair to Councilmember Palmisano. I'll have Council President Payne answer a few, but any additional funding for the co-enforcement program, of course, would provide additional resources to our co-enforcement partners to provide those resources and work product to the individuals that we do serve. As far as the question around how that funding amount was provided, I would defer to Council President Payne.
This was in the previous budget year, actually funded at a 689 level. But that was one-time funding, and so our goal is to get to sustainable funding, because this is a long-term issue that isn't, I mean, about 80% of your comments have been, hey, when we fund a pilot, we have to figure out a way to fund that ongoing, especially if that pilot works. We are at that decision point here of determining a long-term source of funding for this body of work, and it doesn't actually meet the demand around worker protections and the risk of wage theft and other exploitative practices in the workforce. This is helping to close some of those enforcement gaps.
So actually, Council President, I would dispute that most of the things that I object to that we're doing one time with funding ends up, well, this one is past due. I'll acknowledge that. But in coming up with what the right amount of co-enforcement funding is, this goes directly to partner organizations who basically come and lobby us for more money. So I do struggle with how it's more important to fund this at a regular ongoing rate, because it isn't about how we are being able to create a new service ourselves, but it ends up being a pass-through to the community partners who do this work. I appreciate those community partners. They have fingers out into the workforce that we don't have as a city government. But this feels pretty significant in terms of the funding source, and I struggle with that. But we certainly do need ongoing funding for co-enforcement, because it's something that comes up every single year. It's something that we listen to many stories from people organized by SATUL to come and lobby us for this money. Thank you.
May I address, there was maybe a question in there that I could answer.
For sure.
The underlying motion here is actually funding the LSED department in civil rights, and it is civil rights as a determination around what's going to be the most effective way to enforce those worker protections. Co-enforcement has proven to be an effective method, but it is up to LSED to determine whether or not it is best to take that work on in-house or to partner with organizations. I think one of the things when you have one-time funding, which is how this body of work has been funded, you end up kind of being forced to do partnership, because you don't know where that funding stream is going to come from. Now that we have this ongoing funding, certainly I'm assuming that our partners who are effective in accomplishing these goals, this would be passed through funding for that. But now that we have actually a sustainable source in this amendment, now our LSED team can think about it more comprehensively for the long term.
Sorry. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Rainville, followed by Councilmember Vita.
Thank you. So a couple of questions for you, Council President Payne. Did you think through other sources for this? Did you consider other sources for this funding?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Rainville. And it's ironic because my very first attempt at getting sustainable funding for this, I believe I was actually leveraging some of those service worker ones in that first budget year for the 2023 budget year. That amendment didn't pass. And so we did a legislative directive and we asked the administration to suggest what would be a good source of funding for this, and that suggestion was the business licensing fee.
Okay. And then could you expand?
Expand?
I'm sorry. I thought someone wanted to say something.
Well, so we had set up a number of meetings with the administration around how we could operationalize that recommendation of leveraging business license fees. And frankly, there was some wires crossed in the admin to be able to do the technical implementation of that.
Okay. And then you say this continued source of funding then would open the door to perhaps take this in-house?
That would be up to the Civil Rights Department, but yes, I think that it provides that level of clarity around what that funding would be so that there can be longer-term planning.
And do you see the pros and cons one way or the other of going in-house or contract services?
I mean, I have a personal perspective on that, but I think it is ultimately the judgment of the Civil Rights Department on what the best use of those resources would be to accomplish the goal of worker protections.
Okay, thank you.
Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Vita, followed by Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, President Payne, for this. You and I have had conversations for a few years on figuring out sustainable funding for this. I don't agree with the source. I do not want to give up the city services that the trade-off is great for this service, especially because I thought that there was money. Maybe Director Phillips can answer this question, or COO Anderson Kelleher, but I thought there was already money in the base budget for this service.
Welcome back, Director.
Thank you, Vice President Chuck Tai. Through the chair to Councilmember Vita, yes, there is ongoing funding, approximately $182,000 of ongoing funding for co-enforcement.
Okay, so we could use that money for the very same thing that Council President Payne is proposing. That money could be used in this way. And so then would that be, this two parts, I'm sorry. Would that be $680,000 for co-enforcement? First part, we could use that for what he's proposing.
So that money is earmarked specifically for co-enforcement contractual services.
Okay.
So we use that via our RFP and our community partners. So second question, as far as the total goes, yes, it would be approximately $682,000 in total.
Okay, so Council President Payne, could you just explain a little more to me? What's your financial goal here? Like, what is it? Is the 180 not enough, and you've determined that you need 680, or what's the goal here financially?
Yeah, the goal was to get this to a higher number to actually meet the need.
Where did you get the $680,000 need from?
That's what we've been funding it using ARPA funding up to this point.
I mean, but ARPA funding is different, right? Like, it's these one-off allocations. You know when you receive it that it's like a one-time thing, and sustaining the program may not be at the same level as what you were to, what you got to accomplish. Like, you can do more with these one-time funds from ARPA versus like what you will have for an ongoing program.
So over the last few years, this has been funded at about that 680, 690 level, and it's been utilized fully each of those years.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm saying like when a group, ARPA is like a bonus, right? Like at Christmas time, some companies give you a bonus. ARPA was like a bonus to the city. There are lots of departments here who had ARPA funds and could do a lot of different things over the time we had it. But now they're back to the status quo that those dollars aren't there. Are you open to 180 being the ongoing and base money, because that's what we have here, and figuring out what we could do with that since we no longer have the bonus?
The reason for this amendment is to get us back to that funding level at the absence of ARPA.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Ellison, followed by Councilmember Osman.
I would add, just in response to my colleague, I think ARPA was intended to be a bridge. I think we treated it like a bonus, not like royal we, and so then now we're hitting this cliff. And so I do appreciate the spirit of this amendment. I don't think I can support it at this level. CPED is an important department. I know we all know that. But for this ongoing funding, to hear what the trade-off is, especially knowing when we're hitting a moment where we want to be maybe encouraging a lot of economic development, a lot of permitting, new build. We're hitting a natural slow, and I think we don't want to be in a position where the department is being forced to slow even further. So I do think that the trade-off here is really difficult to sort of engage with, and I take some responsibility. This has come up every single year, and it has been something that I have been eager to find an ongoing source for, but I wasn't as involved this year in those conversations, and so that's my apologies to Councilmember Payne. But I'm committed to figuring out some other way we can make this happen even before the end of budget, even if it has to be another one-time source. But the ongoing source and the reduction of CPED, I think, is really difficult to wrestle with and cope with.
Next, I will recognize Councilmember Osman, followed by Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Council Vice President. CBED is very busy department. You can tell how long the meeting takes. The staff is super busy, and I would not be supporting this item as it cuts a large amount of money from CBED department. I think the co-enforcement is very important, and civil rights have been working, and we want to make sure that we are getting the co-enforcement and making sure the people that speak people's language, that knows the community, are working with the city to make sure that they're not getting the wage theft or mistreatment. But this is a huge cut for CBED, a department that is super busy, that I will not be supporting that. And hopefully we can come back with different source and make sure this important topic that we're discussing with the co-enforcement can be funded in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, I will recognize Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. So, Councilmember Payne, I appreciate the more details that you've given. I cannot support this. In Ward 3, I spent a lot of time on business license issues, and believe me, they're slow enough as it is. Kudos to the staff and Director Hanson, you're doing a great job, but you need to go faster, not slower. And as our economy picks up, as we prime the pump, we need that faster speed. I think 182,000 is a very good base to start with. And Councilmember Ellison, if you could lend your expertise and knowledge to trying to get that up, that'd be great. But I won't be voting for this today. Thank you.
Councilmember Palmisano.
I think that a couple things are obvious here. First, civil rights didn't ask for this money. Second, there's an obvious impact to deliver basic city services. It's obvious that any reasonable mayor would need to restore that to provide our city with basic city services. And for that reason, this will increase our budget $500,000 for next year to refill this hole, and in an ongoing way. So this is $500,000. This $500,000 increase will be to our budget in future years. This just doesn't feel like a responsible source. And for those that wish to opine about my proclivity for commenting here, I'm pretty calm about the criticism that I get up here on this dais, but I'm afforded the opportunity to comment just as everyone else here is. And I am operating within the rules that our chair set.
Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you. I actually wasn't going to speak on this, but I am going to say that after failing to create the Labor Standards Board this year, I really feel like we just owe it to make sure that this co-enforcement is sourced so that workers can have an opportunity for their labor and workforce concerns to be valued or to be addressed by the city. So I'm going to be supporting this today.
Could not agree more. Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to point out the fact that this base budget of $182,000 to pretend that that's enough is not factual. This would be cutting co-enforcement services in a time where when we had that ARPA allocation, there was still recorded wage theft happening in the Twin Cities. I believe that there was a Rutgers report that stated that 32,000 workers were facing wage theft in our city. So taking away resources, even adding resources, wage theft is still going to occur. So this is, I understand that this is a difficult decision, but this is one of the very few tools that we have to ensure that workers get paid what they are owed.
With that, colleagues, we have amendment number 48 before us. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Nay.
Vita.
No.
Ellison.
No.
Osman.
No.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
No?
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chuktai.
Aye.
There are 8 ayes and 5 nays.
That motion carries. All right, I think we have just enough time to get through one more amendment. So next up is amendment number 49, which is offered by myself and Councilmember Chowdhury. Yeah. There is a revised version of this amendment that was brought to us by the clerks this morning. And this amendment seeks to create a financial policy director within the city council. I'm going to break up my, I'm going to speak to first the need for this sort of position, and then I'm going to speak to the source, and then I will move approval of this item, and we'll see what we get through. First, on the need. The budget and financial oversight is our most important, is the council's most important policymaking, oversight, and representation power. Under the new government structure, its importance and value has only increased, as evidenced by the last 3 years of, quote unquote, historic number of budget amendments. This is the way in which we affect the implementation of policies. This is the way in which we affect the way how our constituents interact with the city enterprise at our policymaking level. Second, I'm going to speak to the source. So the source on this amendment, as you can see, is a Deputy City Operations Officer, FTE. The Office of Public Service and the Deputy City Operations Officer positions were created following the approval of following the adoption of the Government Restructure Omnibus Ordinance. And in that ordinance, we created the Office of Public Service, and we stated explicitly that it is the responsibility of the council to furnish the Office of Public Service, the city operations officer, with at least one deputy city operations officer, or as many as the council chooses to provide. At this time, currently, the council has chosen to provide the Office of Public Service with 3 deputy city operations officers. And you know, I'm talking about the source in this level of detail in part because we've had extensive conversations with our city attorney's office about how to make this work. So secondarily, appointed positions are approved by the council through when the Human Resources Department and recently the department that is asking for the creation of a new appointed position come before us and show us that the new appointed position meets the criteria outlined in the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances, Section 201010. Those are the presentations that Brenda Miller always comes and presents to us in the Budget Committee. There is so that's the section of the code where we, you know, update and adopt the findings and salary schedule. Currently, there is no process that exists to uncreate something that is approved in via Section 201010. In addition to that, you know, I will say. A place of agreement that I think we have with our attorneys is that what we, the council, has the power to create or the power to fund, we have the power to uncreate or unfund or take away. An example of this, you know, continuing on this Section 201010 discussion, very recently we actually had the Director of Civil Rights come before us and ask us to approve, which we did, an appointed position for a Deputy Director of Civil Rights. What came alongside that action was that she actually she reclassified or used the position for a division director, the Equity and Engagement Division Director, to become this new deputy director position. When we approved that deputy director, we did not approve uncreating the Equity and Engagement Division Director. We just created this new position. Now, currently in the Civil Rights Department, the Equity and Engagement Division no longer exists. It's actually a part of the entire reason why the Urban Scholars Program was moved into the Human Resources Department. That's where that work used to be managed in the past. And so if the administration, as evidenced here, has been able to uncreate an appointed position without formal action in 2010 to undo that former appointed position, then the council I believe has the ability to do the same. With that, I will move approval of this item and I will ask for a second.
Second.
That item has been properly moved and seconded. Colleagues, is there any discussion on amendment number 49 as revised? City Attorney Nielsen.
Thank you, Budget Chair Chuck Tai. In reviewing this amendment, and as you're aware from our discussions, there's a difference between budgeting and funding a position on the one hand, and then establishing or disestablishing a position on the other hand. And this is particularly true with the unclassified service. Excuse me, I can't talk right now. To establish a position in the unclassified service, you are correct. That comes before you for an approval, and you determine if the factors in the Code of Ordinances 20.1010 are met. By that same token, to disestablish, you would have to determine that any one of those factors no longer exists in order to disestablish the position. All of that is separate from the budget decision. And so the advice of the City Attorney's Office, which has already been expressed previously, but I'll repeat it, is that the reference specifically to the Deputy City Operations Officer position should be removed from the amendment. You are obviously free to take that pot of money There could be additional considerations in terms of separation of powers and government structure regarding the need for those 3 positions and how the department might be able to manage that going forward according to need. But our advice is that the reference to the specific position name be removed. You do have obviously the authority to take the budgetary action. That does not eliminate the actual position.
Thank you. I will recognize Council Member Palmisano.
Well, first, Madam Chair, the city attorney just said that this motion is basically improper unless we remove the title position. So are you planning to do that?
The city attorney said it is our advice, it is our recommendation that you remove reference to the specific position. Throughout the day today, and throughout this amendment packet, we have approved amendments that have references to specific positions in them. I want the body to have this conversation, and if it feels incredibly important to the body right now, then I'm happy to consider that. What I will note is, there are several examples throughout the day today of when we have approved amendments that create or fund implementation of pilots, programs, et cetera, that require enabling legislation that has not yet been approved. And in that vein, right, like there's no formal way in which we undo something that exists in 2010. I outlined an example when I introduced this amendment of how just recently a position was eliminated, an appointed position was eliminated by the administration when no such action to eliminate it was approved by the council.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'll just put in my 2 cents then on that one. Yes, I think that position name should be removed. This is a singular position in our city with the person that occupies that position here in the immediate audience. Thanks for pointing out some of the things I've struggled with through this budget process, namely advice from our city attorney that our body doesn't take and instead takes votes to do things that are extremely problematic and risky from a legal perspective. But on this motion specifically, let me get this straight. This substitute amendment proposes to remove the funding and the FTE for one of 4 deputy COOs in favor of funding a budget director for ourselves. Is that accurate?
One of 3 positions, and it is a it's a financial policy director within the Office of City Clerk.
Great. So where do I begin? What has changed other than council trying to flex its muscle that requires this? The narrative for this item states one of our city council's primary responsibilities is financial oversight. Isn't this what oversight and evaluation is for? Madam Chair? Isn't this what oversight and evaluation, that division is for, financial oversight?
There are many different things that are outlined within the Oversight and Evaluation Division's role that has been presented to the Audit Committee and to the Committee of Whole, to our Committee of the Whole. As you are aware, there's also a number of other things that are moving right now with the future of both policy and research and the Oversight and Evaluation Divisions.
Madam Chair, we have 5 full-time employees in that division already. And this is at the expense of the Office of Public Service. I'd like to point out that there are 17 departments that are in OPS with the COO and 3, you were right, DCOOs in the leadership positions. The Office of Community Safety has 5 departments with a commissioner, a chief of staff, 2 directors, and now a deputy commissioner. So that imbalance across our city is already apparent. Our deputy COOs bring a level of coordination, of control and support to our departments that has never existed before. They have a lot of interactions with us as
electeds on this body. Departments of similar work are clustered together for idea sharing, to get out of their silos, and for efficiency. Department heads now have a direct and consistent link to the administration, and they receive supervision and direction that has not been available to them in the past. So I see this as a horrible trade-off. COO Anderson Kelleher, I'm sure I did a disservice in explaining the value of deputy COOs. Could you please elaborate on their importance to this enterprise?
Welcome back.
Thank you, Vice President Chugtai and Councilmember Palmisano. The Office of Public Service oversees 63% of this enterprise. 63% of the enterprise. That is done by myself and these 3 deputies, along with the Director of Public Works, who has his own quite substantial body of work. I want to point out a couple of things. It is no doubt that the council needs more assistance on their budgeting. The council vice president and I discussed that last week. But to take a DCOO position with its fringe and salary at $264 and pay apparently the financial policy director to the city council more than the in-charter budget director for the city of Minneapolis, and I'm sorry this is uncomfortable, Ms. DeSenza's salary is $134,000 and fringe is $30,000. That's a swing of about $100,000. I just want to point out that this council in the last 2 years looked into whether the morale and how employees were feeling, how it was going. I think Councilmember Wansley had a couple hearings about that. Data from the recent My Minneapolis Employee Engagement Survey shows that the current structure that we have has had a positive impact on how employees are feeling. It includes increasing employees intending to stay at the city of Minneapolis. It includes increasing employees' feeling of being valued, the increase of employees who believe they can achieve their career goals here. I will say, in the Office of Public Service, that is directly related to really good management and good support of our department heads, of their deputies, and therefore those people can support their employees.
I apologize. Councilmember Palmisano's time has expired. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Vital.
COO Anderson Kelleher, I'll let you use some of my time, but I just need to make some comments first because I actually feel ill. Like this is tough. I've taken my earrings out because I'm ready to fight for this position. I mean that, and I don't mean like physically fight. I mean like we got to have a really big discussion about this. This is a woman. This is a black woman's position that we're talking about here. I don't even know what I can or can't say because we're talking about a specific position here, but it just feels so icky. It just feels bad. It feels like everything this council has been talking about, the morale of staff here. I'm having a hard time just even holding my head up, just thinking about what something like this just does to everyone in this enterprise, everyone that's watching this position being taken this way publicly. It just feels so bad. I don't know how my colleagues don't feel bad about this either. This is not the way you lead. This is not how you do business of a city. And I'm not like, I don't even feel like I'm crying about this. I'm just hurt. I just know how it feels to be a black woman on the chopping block in the workplace. I know what it feels like to give all to a position and to do what you can to try to set the tone for being the best. What you have to do as a black woman, you don't have an opportunity to not be the best. We all grow up knowing we got to be better than everybody, or those positions don't last for us. And then to just be publicly just treated this way is so bad. I feel terrible. I knew it was real, but I just didn't feel like it would be. I really thought something was going to change and this wasn't going to happen. I just feel terrible. This is just an awful, awful way of leading. It just doesn't make sense. I want my colleagues to have the support they need. I understand that these legislative positions matter. They really do. I believe in them. But it's what, and I don't want to use you in my fight, Councilmember Ellison, but it's just what you and I have been talking about for 3 years just rings so true in this matter. When you are trying to work to do better, when you're trying to work to increase relation between the council and staff, something like this is something you can never come back from. There's an entire enterprise of people that are watching this. Colleagues, I'm begging you, I'm pleading, please, let's pause on this. Let's figure out a way, because we don't need to do this. This does not need to be our legacy as council members. This does not need to be a part of who we are. It is completely unnecessary. We don't have to do this way. We really don't. I'm begging you. I've never felt so terrible about an action that this council, even though, I'm not supporting it, but if it passed, it belongs to all of us. It's gonna be this council strip this black woman of her job. That can't be me. I don't wanna be a part of that. COO Anderson Kelleher, if you want to, I have 3 minutes left. If you want to speak more, please do so.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Vitaw, thank you for those comments. I want to say this. I don't intend on firing a DCOO, but I will tell you what the rest of the budget is, because I think it's important for you to know. We have $7,000 for basic operations every year in this department. That covers everything else we do. We had $250,000 one time for George Floyd Square. That was one time in 2024. We don't have that going forward. We have $250,000 for open streets going forward. We have about, I think, 5 other staff people beyond the 3 DCOOs and myself in OPS directly. We have one line item of $31,000 statutorily required by the state of Minnesota for the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board that I think a couple people serve on here. We had one new proposal this year. I believe that you would, if you know me, know I'm not an empire builder. No, I am thrifty. We had one tiny capacity building request for $30,000. I have traveled nowhere this year. I will probably not travel anywhere this year. I work here every day, and so do my DCOOs. I will let that stand for itself.
Colleagues, we are 12 minutes over the time that we were going to break. So if it is okay with everyone, I believe that we need to table this amendment and return back to this. And formally, we will need to actually move to send everything that we have approved so far, everything we've taken, all the amendments we've taken final action on to council, and move all amendments that we have not taken final action on to the city council meeting without recommendation. So that we will be doing. Now, I understand there are several colleagues in queue. I have had a chance to talk with Council Member Chowdhury, and certainly it is our intention to remove the reference to a deputy city operations officer, that specific FTE, from the amendment itself. I think that the best course of action here is to table this and move this and all remaining amendments that we haven't acted on forward to council without recommendation. Can I and then can we do a voice vote on this one? Those in favor, can you signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, can you say nay? The ayes have it. That motion carries, and we are now adjourned, and we will reconvene the adjourned city council meeting at 6:05 p.m. this evening.
You can't let them do this. Listen, I don't care how you vote, Chair Mike. I really don't. But this is fucked up. This is fucking embarrassing. Like, you cannot do that. You gotta fuck. They don't know how terrible it is to be, like, just exposed like that. The way that this looks.